Good morning, Adelaide. 6 o'clock at 5AD. It's going to be another hot one today. 36 degrees is the forecast top. Now, though it's going to be another sunny day, I'm afraid I can't say I've got any good news for you. Still no rain in sight. The rainless days record climbs to 555 as of today, the 22nd day of February 1986. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it before. Boil the water, won't you? Now for the first musical offering of the day, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head.
Corner Grenfell, King William Street. Status here, all clear. What is your status, please?
This police car is cruising the area for your protection. There are looters in the district.
By the way, you've seen the government's slogan around the city, stick it out. Well, a friend of mine called Harry stuck it out and got it sunburned. Seriously though, ladies and gentlemen, don't leave Adelaide. Do stick it out. It's only with your help, a team effort, that this city will be great again.
Municipal swimming pools are now available for personal washing. Consult your roster for availability. Use only public toilets erected at alternate street intersections. You must not use your own toilets. Laundry activities may utilise the rationed water at your discretion.
Please report anybody behaving suspiciously. Some telephone systems are not operating. In cases of emergency, please ask us to relay any messages. All available police have been mobilised to assist the public. Remember to boil all water before use.
And if it please thee in our great necessity to send us at least a joyful rain upon thine inheritance, and refresh it when it is dry, to the great comfort of us, thy unworthy servants, and to the glory of thy holy name. Amen.
Spokesmen from the Riverina and Sunraysia irrigation areas assure us that the local irrigators are taking minimum quantities of water from the river to sustain their crops. We're assured that they are concerned greatly about Adelaide's continuing plight and are doing everything possible to help. But the fact remains that there is no water in the river for water supply.
Would you please boil it?
Water tankers from Mount Gambier and the southeast are keeping up with ration demands. The government urges the householder to use extreme restraint.
Johnny's sick.
Phone's dead.
Bravo 030, I'll be attending.
My son's sick too.
Nurse McCann reports casualty.
But all the rooms are full, and this is the overflow.
I know.
Calling Dr. Jensen. Dr. Jensen.
Anne, are you?
I feel terrible.
Australia, the driest continent on Earth. The Murray-Darling, an ancient river in an ancient land. Born more than 100 million years ago in the melting snows of the high country, it is the world's fourth longest river system, and its tranquil, fragile beauty was unique. Nowhere on Earth was there anything like it. The black man found it and lived and hunted in its broad valley. He trod lightly on its banks and left its perfect rhythms undisturbed as he followed the seasons in harmony for 30,000 years.
Well, gentlemen, here it is. Australia's inland highway. We'll make this river serve us well.
The delicate chain was broken. Soon paddle steamers had penetrated the inland, with voyages up the Darling to Menindee, Burke and beyond. More than 3/4 of the river system had been opened up to trade. The paddle steamer replaced the slow and expensive bullock wagon and replaced the isolation with the comforts of the cities.
But the riverboat's steam engines were hungry for fuel. 1,000-year-old red gums lined the banks. Each steamer burned a ton of wood every 2 hours. And so, the red gums were felled.
With the constant wash from the paddle wheelers and the disappearance of the trees, nature started losing the battle against erosion. The need for a reliable river link with the cities brought in turn a need for a reliable water level for navigation. Summer often left the boats high and dry, and so the engineers came to build their locks and weirs. The river became a series of pools. The delicately balanced living system had been fragmented. When the gold rush ended, the Victorian government was invited to consider the future of thousands of ex-miners.
Irrigation, gentlemen?
No, sir.
I read your report yesterday, and I'm disappointed that neither of you had got the good sense to realize that this desert will bloom one day.
Sir, our small population could never absorb the harvest you expect. Most of it would have to be sent halfway around the world to be sold on a losing market. My colleague and I are staking our reputations on our report. And after careful study, it is our considered opinion that irrigation will never be profitable on the Murray. Never!
My dear Premier, I have pleasure in reporting that I have met and encouraged the 2 Canadian gentlemen with much experience in irrigation to set up a trial scheme in the Mildura area. These men, the Chaffee brothers, assure me that they will have the desert blooming in mere months. I am greatly impressed and encouraged.
But under the feet of the new farmers lay a prehistoric sea. The ocean had once covered the middle of the Murray Valley. When it receded, it left billions of tons of salt in an underground water system, finely balanced and ready to move.
Well, that's all very well indeed. But what are you going to do about the salt in the river?
Today, after 150 years of exploitation, the Murray River has been dammed, choked, diverted, controlled, and poisoned.
Murray? That's down near the Victorian border.
It's a great place for water skiing. We have to drink it after everybody else has used it.
The River Murray is scientifically very interesting. It is also, of course, of great economic value. And it forms an important part of the nation's natural heritage. One might expect, therefore, that we would know a lot about it scientifically, that it would be the subject of a great deal of conservation measures, and that it would be prudently and wisely managed. None of those things apply.
Larger by volume than Sydney Harbour, Lake Hume is filled by snow-fed streams. The Hume Weir restricts the river's headwaters. It is the master control and regulator of the now artificial river. The Dartmouth Dam, 45 kilometres from Lake Hume, provides additional water in dry seasons for maintaining the level of the Murray through the Hume Weir.
The building of the Hume Weir was a cut-off point in the history of the river. The end of an era and the beginning of a new one that was to make the river Australia's largest irrigation channel. It is rapidly becoming Australia's largest sewer.
Albury-Wodonga is a city of today built for tomorrow. There are about 55,000 people here 8 years ago when it started, 75,000 now, and our objective is to develop this to a city of 150,000 by the end of the century. It'll be developed on the basis of employment and opportunity. Opportunity for education, opportunity for families to grow and to develop here, opportunity for all of those things that an Australian would want to have in an Australian city. I think Albury-Wodonga in the future will be a city of world standard.
More people means more effluent, more runoff, more pollution to the river.
I don't think there's any doubt we're very fortunate to be establishing Albury-Wodonga in this period of Australia's history, when the awareness and the consciousness of environmental issues is so great. We're very, very concerned that the establishment of a city of this size on the upper end of the Murray River, Australia's major river system, should not cause environmental issues. About 8 years ago, we established a major environmental laboratory that continually monitors the quality of the river water and measures what has to be done to treat anything that might run into it to ensure that it doesn't in any way downgrade the river system. We've established rules that ensure that no industry will be established here that does not have a biodegradable effluent. We've established techniques in conjunction with major water authorities in Australia, with the Snowy Mountains Authority and the River Murray Commission, to ensure that we are properly draining the town, that major conservation issues have been addressed, that we have established techniques that ensure that the runoff from the city will not cause flooding in the river, and above all, we've established the design for a very sophisticated sewage treatment program. That treatment program will ensure that we give full tertiary treatment to the river, to the waters before they run into the river, to the waters from the sewage plant.
Two of the present Albury sewerage ponds are as close as 5 metres from the river's edge.
Most of the river town's effluent disposal systems are going to have to be moved. They are far too close to the catchment areas of the river.
The Albury paper mill takes 18 megalitres of water from the Murray every day and returns 15. The mill is proud of its pollution control, which returns water downstream of the city with a residue well under the permitted maximum.
I think they've done quite a good job up there with the pollution control and the cleaning up of the water, but the fact remains that they are taking clean water out of Hume Dam and returning used water, albeit treated and cleaned up, back to the river. Now we get this same story all along the Murray. Everyone says, oh, my little contribution is not significant. The fact remains that 10,000 non-significants add up to quite a lot by the time it gets down here to us.
A few kilometres down from Albury, the river changes dramatically. High water flows for irrigation cause bank erosion as thousands of tons of silt are picked up and carried down the shallowing channel and dumped as the stream constricts. The water is forced out of the main stream, which is now too narrow to hold it, into surrounding creeks, and the strangled original river becomes a trickle. On the fast-flowing side, the current undercuts its banks. Trees fall. The river alters its course. Erosion silt fills deep holes and destroys the homes of native fish. Silt also screens the light and interferes with feeding. 55 kilometres downstream from Albury, the river is dammed again. Wherever weirs are built, a permanently elevated pool follows, drowning whole forests. The trees at Lake Mulwala have died in their country's service. For the first time in its journey to the sea, the Murray has become the wide, majestic stream we are familiar with. Navigation is now possible from Yarrawonga Weir for nearly 2,000 kilometres to the sea.
If you wanted to, you could navigate all the way down to Lake Alexandrina. They just open the lock gates at this end, let you take your boat inside, shut the gates, pump the water level to the required height, and they let you out the other side.
You see, it's the Murray River water that keeps you looking young, but you must drink it and bathe in it. They do everything else in it here.
From the Hume Weir to Adelaide, the river is a water supply. But it also floats a growing recreation industry which has little control over human pollution. Recreational uses of the river bank with its effluents is another contribution.
At one stage, we used to export red gum wood from here. Red gum wood used to go as far away as Scotland from here.
In fact, the largest forest, red gum forest in Australia, is just 40 miles ahead of us by river or 20 miles by road, and that is the Barmah forest. In fact, the Barmah forest is the largest forest of any type in Australia. There's 87,000 acres of forest there.
In the Barmah forest, the Murray constricts, and the narrow channel is well named the Barmah Choke. This structure was caused by an uplift of high ground diagonally across the river. During flooding, the water spills out into the Barmah forest. Before the Hume Weir was built, floods passed through in winter and spring, promoting vigorous regeneration. The forest was drained by the long, hot summers. The delicate interaction of red gum and river is now threatened. The river's flooding is closely controlled, and the call for water in the peak irrigation season causes a summer flood in the forest. The regeneration cycle is destroyed. The trees that once gave new life to the forest are losing their own.
removal of these big trees out of the forest is a necessity. We've got to let the little trees grow. The big trees absorb too much water. Just through lack of flooding now and through river control, we just don't get the floods we used to. At this rate, if we don't get more water, the forest would die.
It's not unreasonable to suggest that if we continue our destruction of the Barmah, our grandchildren, in order to see a red gum forest, will have to go to Israel or California.
From Turrumbary Weir, the river is now heading for a huge salt-saturated area, which stretches to the sea. It is about to suffer salt invasion, not only through its banks and runoff from saline creeks and paddocks, but from active springs in the river bed.
Older people have told me that this Bar Creek was once a very beautiful freshwater creek. They speak of the time when they could catch Murray cod up to 100 or 110 pounds. The times they hunted ducks along it and just to go picnicking along the trees, on shady trees along the banks of it. Once the salt became evident in the irrigation areas around here, drastic measures were taken to control the salt. The creek was dredged and it was turned from its freshwater status to this salt drain condition that you see today. Over there we have the original bed of the creek with the salt seeping in caused by the underground pressure of water, salt water seeping in, running down and going into the excavated bed of the creek, which then flows down. So what you had once was a beautiful freshwater stream, wildlife, trees, something to be enjoyed. We now have this dirty, stinking salt drain with black mud, rubbish, dead trees, stumps and salty water.
Bar Creek is a saline sewer. We managed to get $2.5 million back in the drought of 1967-68 to install some pumps. Unfortunately, the evaporation basin to where the water is pumped is inadequate to allow the pumps to operate full time, with the result that the Bar continues to be the single greatest source of saline pollution along the Murray.
The Bar Creek contributes 13% of the total salt in the Murray River. Water from the Bar Creek is pumped into the Lake Tutchewop system near Swan Hill.
Tutchewop used to be a freshwater lake with willow trees on the shore where people used to come and swim at the weekends. And now, of course, as you can see, it's just a rotten, putrid, stinking mess, lifeless hole, really.
And now the government proposed to pump the water out of Lake Tutchewop to a set of basins known as the mineral reserves.
The 3 mineral reserves basins are large natural depressions nearby. They will be used to increase the holding capacity of the Lake Tutchewop scheme.
With this scheme, there's just over 2 square miles to be inundated of this type of country, and yet there's some 13 square miles to be acquired.
There's 9 farmers to be forcibly evicted from their properties. One of them is a 3-generation farmer. The other one is a grandfather settled the area. The need to take 13 square miles indicates how this area won't hold water.
That's right, and it's only going to go straight down into the water table and back off to the river.
This desolate salt pan is the result of seepage under the hill from a pond very similar to the one that is proposed to establish at the mineral reserves. Salt seepage water is pumped to an evaporation pond. The water then seeps under the hill, bubbles to the surface here and evaporates, and the resulting salt deposit has changed this from a reasonably fertile lake to this scene now of utter desolation.
Lake Tyrrell, 55 kilometres away, is a natural salt lake in the lowest elevation in the area. Salt is harvested commercially. The Mineral Reserve Scheme has been planned to use Lake Tyrrell as the last evaporation basin of the system.
This whole scheme is bloody futile.
The river now enters the land it has rescued from the desert. The Murray from this point is constantly monitored for salinity levels. In a typical dry season, the river at Swan Hill is measured at 200 parts per million. Irrigation is a $100 million a year industry, now in economic decline. Each irrigator along the Murray River has a water allocation calculated on the size of his land. It is ironic that an expensive, failing primary industry should have been conceived and developed on land saturated by salt. Salt damage to crops is usually sudden. Constant vigilance and careful planning are futile against its savage attacks. The salt often rises almost overnight and kills fully developed trees. This happens whenever the underground water is forced to the surface by hydraulic pressure.
There are huge accumulations of salt in this soil because it was once under the sea. Millions of tons of it, in fact. We put water on. There are impermeable clay layers down below. The water can't get through. It builds up in the soil. It creates a high water table. And when the water table gets up near the surface, about so far, a capillary action brings the salt water to the surface. The sun evaporates the water and leaves the salt behind on the surface.
Downstream of Swan Hill, the Murrumbidgee River flows gently in. Its water, being fresher than the Murray, lowers the salt level slightly. Robin Vale, river salinity 130 parts per million. As far away as the Queensland border, fertilizers are washed into the small feeder streams of the Murray-Darling system. With other man-made pollutants entering along its catchment, a new menace begins to threaten the river. Waterborne disease.
I've requested figures from the department of what makes up the bacteria count of the water which we drink. They haven't refused to give me the information, but they haven't been giving it to me either.
After 100 years of thoughtless exploitation, the viability of the River Murray system as a resource is in jeopardy. Honourable members will recall that recently it even ceased to flow to the sea.
In June 1981, a federal member of Parliament introduced a bill to upgrade and extend the research and planning of freshwater resources.
It is the politicians who have failed to manage properly our water resources, and the squabbles over power and empires have put at risk our most precious resource. It is time that parochial and vested interests were swept aside and that effective, impartial and national approaches were taken to our water resources.
Ralph Jacoby's bill passed through the Senate.
But government statesmen since indicate that it'll be defeated in the House of Representatives. And I believe the reason why it will be defeated is that the federal government lacks the sheer political courage to bite the bullet.
Mildura, river salinity 210 parts per million. The salt levels in the river from here to its mouth are often dangerously high. They regularly exceed the World Health Organization's permitted maximum level for drinking water.
The grave emerging problem is dryland salinity, which is spreading over the entire inland of Australia, resulting in periodically greater backwash into the Murray of salinity. We are overcoming the Ceylon problem locally by use of under-tree irrigation, but that is just accepting the position. The remedial action that is being taken is not keeping pace with the problem.
Salt not only kills productive land, these giants are among its victims. Lines of pumps have been sunk to intercept the underground salt water flowing into the river through its banks.
And it's not just Ceylon pollution in the Murray that one must be aware of. It's pollution of all kinds, and the best example I can give of this is that when a water supply scheme for the little township of Baronga was being considered, the New South Wales authorities made a bald statement, namely that the colour and turbidity of the water does not indicate a standard fit for human consumption.
But there are still far too many irrigators who take irresponsible attitudes towards irrigation. They just slop the water on and slop it off and don't care where it lies about or what salt it causes or what problems it causes to downstream users.
Everybody blames everyone else upstream for the quality of the water that they get.
We do not, in my opinion, have a moral right to send water full of salt or other pollutants to downstream users.
What happens downstream is no real concern of mine.
It's almost 100 years now since the first analysis of irrigation in Australia suggested that it would be uneconomic and not the best use of resources. That early prediction has been borne out many times in the last 100 years and never more so than today.
The Darling enters the Murray below Mildura. Wentworth was once proposed as the location for the federal capital, it being strategically placed on the junction of Australia's two mighty rivers. In the past, the Darling has acted as a diluting flow. The New South Wales government intends, through irrigation licensing, to stop the Darling flowing into the Murray.
Good, we'd be better off without the Darling water. Ever since the Menindee Lakes storages were completed in the early 60s, they've acted as an evaporation basin to concentrate the salts on the ever-reducing dribble of water that New South Wales permits to get into the lakes. The result has been that the water coming down the Darling to us over the last 3 summers has been of lower quality than the water coming down the Murray. We'd be far better off without it.
It's got to be admitted that the water of the Darling often is muddy, but this can be a blessing in disguise because the waters now are often so polluted that it's the keeping out of sunshine by the mud in the water that stops an algal bloom which would putrefy it altogether.
In the next 30 seconds, and every half minute of every day, more than a ton of salt will pass this point. This is more than 1 million tons a year, and in a dry season the amount may double or treble.
South Australians are always screaming about the quality of the water that is delivered to the border from the eastern states. But it is a fact that once the water crosses the border into this state, the salt level doubles between the South Australian Victorian border and Morgan and Mannum, where the water is pumped off for drinking purposes in South Australia.
Renmark. River salinity, 300 parts per million.
About 20 years ago there was a great increase in the amount of drainage that was undertaken in Renmark, and evaporation basins were rather hastily constructed in situations that were close and accessible, and this is an indication of the sort of thing that can happen. Seepage has occurred under the hill from the adjacent evaporation basin. Salt water has bubbled to the surface and evaporated, forming this salt crust. With 2 of the other basins closer to the river, the same sort of seepage occurs. Gums and native boxes are killed on the way, but water from the basin seeps back into the river, and it very greatly increases the salt level of the river as it passes this district.
Well, when I was young, I first remember fishing when I used to go out with my father. He was a fisherman when I was about 6 years old. And those days, we used to get a lot of big cod. Cod seemed to be the main fish.
Some species of fish had always travelled long distances upstream to feed and spawn. But with the river's separation into pools, their breeding habits were affected and their numbers declined. Cold storage water, released from weirs, further reduced their numbers. Introduced fish then began to compete for food and territory.
Yes, when the European carp first came, it was about 1971, 70, something like that. And we thought then the second year they were in such large numbers that they were going to have a bad effect on the native fish.
Being mud feeders, the carp also help to cloud the water.
Since the arrival of the carp, the catfish numbers have seemed to be reduced. Redfin, which is English perch, has practically disappeared. And the tench, another imported fish, has been in the river for years. Well, he seems to have gone altogether. We don't get any of those.
During the 150 years of man's control of the Murray, life in all forms has suffered. Wetlands have been drained, the river's course has altered, and natural cycles reversed. Birds have suffered the effects of intensive settlement and irrigation development as their breeding areas shrink. Thousands of tons of poisons are spread every year. Sophisticated spraying techniques have endangered all species of birds, and some are already extinct. Below Renmark, the river changes again. Sometime in the recent past, its flow accelerated, and it cut deep into the ancient riverine sediments and formed the golden calcareous cliffs lining much of the Murray's course in South Australia. Because Australia is the flattest continent on Earth, the river is slow flowing. The effect of a mild flood will burst its banks and spill out into a labyrinth of billabongs and reaches. Waikerie, river salinity 480 parts per million. Saline irrigation water has permeated the topsoil and picked up more salt as it travels sideways to the river and discharges through natural relief vents in the cliffs. Nearby, a geological survey party is trying to locate a series of bubbling springs in the riverbed, introducing water with an estimated salt level of up to 100,000 parts per million. This is about 3 times saltier than the sea. Morgan, river salinity 490 parts per million. The water now has high levels of bacteria, protozoa and viruses.
The Murray River has finished its great westward flowing course, which it's followed up to now. It turns sharply south and starts on its last run down to the sea at Goolwa. The Murray-Darling is the 4th longest river system of the world, and water at this point can have travelled downstream for anything up to 3,500 kilometres. And the quality of the water is a reflection of everything that's happened to the river, to its banks, and the vast catchment area which it drains. The water that has flowed naturally down the river to this point, here at Morgan, enters on a new phase of its journey. It's sucked out of the river and sent through a massive pipeline system to serve the needs of the people of the York Peninsula, of Whyalla, indeed as far afield as Woomera.
The maximum permitted amount of chlorine is added.
Already as much chlorine as can safely be used is added to the water supply to kill the pathogenic microorganisms, the viruses, bacteria and protozoa which pollute Murray waters. And yet last year in Whyalla, whose water supply comes from this pumping station, a 10-year-old boy died of amoebic meningitis. And the question must be asked, if we choose to increase the pollution load on this river, How many more deaths from waterborne disease will we have to endure in South Australia?
Mannum, river salinity 520 parts per million.
And here, even further downstream, water is taken out of the river and sent by pipeline west across the Mount Lofty Ranges to where the people of an Australian capital city are waiting to turn on their taps and drink it. And in terms of salinity and water hardness, the quality of that water often leaves much to be desired. But in terms of turbidity, odour and colour, by World Health Organization standards, the properties of the water are more often than not unacceptable.
Adelaide is on the edge of a desert. The pipeline from Mannum supplies it with the lowest quality water of any capital city in Australia. This will not improve while Adelaide depends for survival on the Murray. The water catchments near the city are inadequate, and Adelaide is in the driest state of the driest continent on Earth.
I must comment on this myth about Adelaide's water supplies. They're good. One asked three things of domestic water. One, that it be present in relatively large amounts. Secondly, that it be palatable, drinkable. And thirdly, that it be safe to drink, healthy. And in all of those areas, Adelaide water is quite good.
South Australia's Minister for Health was invited to comment on the quality of Adelaide's water. The Minister declined.
You know, it's often been said that the only way to drink River Murray water is when it's been filtered through a grapevine.
You get a mill in every glass. In fact, it's bloody disgusting.
It'd kill a brown dog.
It's full of
Since records commenced in 1900, a 10-year drought and flood cycle has become evident for the southeast of Australia. The even decades have brought the droughts, the 20s, the 40s and the 60s. The wet years were the 30s, the 50s and the 70s. The 1956 flood is well remembered along the Murray River. The 1980s is a drought decade. The Murray River ceased flowing to the sea in 1980. The 1982-83 drought was the worst drought ever. At the end of the 1982-83 summer, the Hume Dam held 6% of its capacity. The Dartmouth, 15%. As this film was completed, it was estimated that these storages would be dry in 7 weeks. The mighty Murray River would then stop. And what of Adelaide? With no alternative water supply, and with 8 possible consecutive drought years ahead, it is not unreasonable that scenes like this are closer to reality than you think.